It was a damp, misty afternoon in Edinburgh when Sam Heughan stepped out of the black car waiting outside the Old Stone Hotel. He had spent the morning filming an emotionally charged scene for his new historical drama, and his mind was still caught in the swirl of costume, dialogue, and camera flashes. All he wanted was a quiet lunch before retreating to his apartment. A few blocks away, Dakota Johnson was pacing in the lobby of the same hotel, her sunglasses perched high on her head, clutching a worn leather notebook. She was in Scotland on a secret location scout for a new indie film, trying to escape the constant hum of Los Angeles and the inevitable comparisons to her famous parents. The Highlands had always fascinated her, the raw beauty, the myths of loyalty and rebellion, the sense of belonging. She had no idea she was about to walk straight into one of those myths herself. Their paths crossed at the corner of the hotel restaurant, just as Sam was leaving and Dakota was entering. A waiter bumped Dakota's arm, sending her notebook tumbling to the ground. Sam bent instinctively, picking it up before she could. "Here," he said, his Scottish accent wrapping around the single word like a warm scarf. "Thank you," she replied, slightly startled. When she looked up, she met a pair of bright, mischievous blue eyes she recognized from countless magazine covers but had never seen this close. "You're..." "Sam," he finished for her, with a half smile. "And you're Dakota Johnson, right?" She laughed nervously. "Guilty. What are you doing here?" "Filming, mostly. And avoiding the rain. You?" "Location scouting. And apparently dropping things," she said, glancing at her notebook. They both chuckled, and for a moment the noise of the restaurant faded away. "Have you eaten?" Sam asked suddenly. "There's a quiet little place nearby. No paparazzi. Just coffee and good soup." She hesitated. She had promised herself no distractions on this trip. But something in his tone, warm, unhurried, un-Hollywood, disarmed her. "I could use some coffee," she admitted. They walked together through the drizzle to a tiny cafe tucked into a cobbled alleyway. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon filled the air. Sam held the door open. Dakota slipped inside, shaking off the cold. They sat at a small table by the window. "So," Sam began, stirring his tea, "are you scouting for something big?" Dakota smiled, running a finger along the rim of her mug. "An indie. About choices. About freedom. About living a life that's yours and no one else's." "Sounds like something I'd watch," he said. "Or act in." She laughed. "You'd make a good lead. But I think you're a bit busy with your own epics." Sam shrugged. "Even epics end eventually. Then you look for the next story." For an hour they talked, about films, about travel, about how strange it felt to live lives that everyone else thought they understood. He told her about growing up in Dumfries and Galloway, about the first time he performed Shakespeare in a school gymnasium. She told him about sneaking into art house cinemas as a teenager, about writing her first screenplay in a cramped New York apartment. They discovered they both loved the same obscure 1970s folk band, the same kind of dark chocolate, the same Scottish poet whose verses curled like smoke around the heart. When they finally left the cafe, the rain had stopped. A thin shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the wet stones gold. Sam walked her back to her hotel. Outside the door, he paused. "I'd say, see you around, but this business is unpredictable." Dakota hesitated, then said, "We could make it predictable. Dinner tomorrow?" His smile widened, genuine and a little surprised. "I'd like that." She scribbled her number on a napkin and handed it to him. For a moment their fingers brushed, nothing dramatic, just a spark of warmth in the cool air. As she disappeared into the hotel, Sam looked down at the napkin. The ink had smudged slightly from the drizzle, but the numbers were still legible. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket like something precious. That night, back in his flat, Sam poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the city lights. He told himself it was just dinner, just two actors talking shop. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. It was a feeling he hadn't had in years, that strange, exhilarating sense of standing at the edge of a story he didn't yet know the ending to. And miles away, in her hotel room, Dakota lay awake, the sound of the rain against the window like a drumbeat. She thought about his eyes, his voice, the way he listened without checking his phone once. She had come to Scotland to find locations for a film. Instead, she had stumbled onto a scene she couldn't have scripted better herself. The next evening, the restaurant Sam had chosen was a tucked-away bistro on the edge of the old town, dimly lit with candles flickering in wine bottles. Dakota arrived a little late, wearing a simple black coat and her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. Sam was already seated, a glass of water in front of him, glancing at the door with a mix of hope and nerves he hadn't felt in a long time. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat opposite him. "Hi yourself," he replied, the corners of his mouth lifting. "You look different out of the rain." They both laughed, and the ice melted instantly. A waiter brought menus, but they barely glanced at them. Conversation flowed easily, as if they were picking up a thread from a long time ago rather than just yesterday. Sam told her about the relentless pace of filming, the early mornings, the heavy costumes, the emotional drain of long shoots. Dakota spoke about the double-edged sword of independence, the freedom to choose projects, but also the loneliness of constantly being on the move. At one point she said, "Sometimes I feel like everyone has an idea of who I am, but nobody really knows me." Sam looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I get that. People fall in love with characters, not with us. It's hard to remember you're more than a role." Their food arrived, roasted salmon with herbs for her, venison stew for him, but it went mostly untouched. They were too engrossed in each other's stories. By the time dessert came, a simple crème brûlée to share, the restaurant was nearly empty. Dakota traced patterns on the tablecloth with her fingertip. "I'm supposed to go back to London tomorrow," she said. "Meetings, scripts, more scouting." Sam felt a pang he didn't expect. "Then this is goodbye." She hesitated, then smiled. "Not if you're free for coffee in the morning." The next morning they met again, this time at a small park overlooking the Firth of Forth. The sun was bright but the wind bit at their cheeks. They walked slowly along a path lined with bare winter trees, sipping takeaway coffee from paper cups. "Tell me something nobody knows about you," Dakota challenged. Sam chuckled. That's dangerous. But okay, I still keep a notebook from drama school in my bedside drawer. Whenever I'm lost, I read the notes my old teacher wrote in the margins. Dakota smiled. That's actually sweet. He tilted his head. Your turn. She hesitated. I write letters I never send. To people I've lost, to people I've loved, to parts of myself. They fill up boxes in my closet. He looked at her with new softness. We're both collectors then, of words. They walked in silence for a while, comfortable and unhurried. Sam wanted to reach for her hand but wasn't sure if it was too soon. Dakota wanted him to, but didn't want to seem like she expected it. At the end of the path, the view opened to the grey-blue sea. I have to leave tonight, she said quietly. Back to London, back to real life. Sam nodded, hiding his disappointment. You'll be back though, for the shoot? I think so, she said. And maybe for you. He turned to her, surprised. For me? She met his gaze. Maybe. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. Her driver had arrived. She slipped her glove back on and gave him a small, almost shy smile. Thank you for the coffee. For everything. He wanted to say something grand, something that would anchor this moment in both their lives. But all he managed was, safe travels, Dakota. She nodded, turned, and walked toward the waiting car. He watched until the door closed and the car pulled away. Only then did he realize he was still holding the paper cup she'd handed him, the lipstick mark on its rim a quiet, stubborn proof she'd been there. That night, alone in his flat, Sam opened his notebook and wrote, "She's like a script I don't want to finish reading. A scene I don't want to end." And somewhere in a London hotel, Dakota pulled out one of her unsent letter notebooks and began a new page. To the man with the blue eyes and the quiet laugh. Scotland felt like a dream. I hope it wasn't. A few weeks later, London was caught in its usual January drizzle. Dakota stepped out of a black car and pulled her hood up, trying to avoid the waiting cameras. She had just landed a major role in an indie drama set in Scotland. The press loved the idea of her working there, though no one yet knew how intertwined her life had become with the country, and with Sam. Inside a quiet cafe near Covent Garden, Sam was already waiting. He'd flown in for meetings about a charity project, but mostly, if he was honest with himself, to see her. He rose when she entered, brushing the rain from his jacket. Still raining, he said, grinning. Always, she replied. But you're here. They sat at a corner table and ordered tea. The cafe was bustling but no one seemed to notice them. For a moment it felt like they were invisible again, just two people in a city of millions. Sam leaned in. You know they're already speculating. About us? He nodded. Pictures of me arriving at Heathrow. Pictures of you at the same hotel. People connect dots that aren't even there. Dakota sipped her tea, thinking. Maybe the dots are there. He looked at her, surprised by her openness. Do you want him to be? She set her cup down. I don't know. I've spent so long hiding every part of my personal life. But this, It doesn't feel like something to hide. Sam reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. We don't have to decide now. We can take it one step at a time. Just then a camera flash lit up the window. Paparazzi had found them. Sam pulled back instinctively, but Dakota squeezed his hand. It's okay, she whispered. For the next hour they talked about everything but the flashing lights outside. Her upcoming film, his new charity initiative in Africa, the strange isolation of fame. When they finally left the cafe, hand in hand, the photographers swarmed. Questions were shouted, cameras clicked. Sam put an arm protectively around Dakota's shoulders as they pushed through the crowd. Later that evening, social media exploded. Ideographic period, Sam Heughan and Dakota Johnson in London. Are they dating? Outlander star and Hollywood icon spotted together. Fans posted blurry photos, dissecting body language. Hashtags trended worldwide. In the midst of it all, Sam and Dakota retreated to her apartment, shutting out the noise. Inside, she kicked off her shoes and leaned against the door, breathing hard. So much for privacy, she said. Sam laughed softly. I guess the world knows now. Do you regret it? He shook his head. Not for a second. She crossed the room to him, her expression softer now. Then maybe it's time we stop pretending this is just coincidence. He smiled. Maybe it's time. Over the next few weeks, they navigated the strange new reality together. Paparazzi followed them to airports, restaurants, even the grocery store. Tabloids spun wild stories about secret engagements and dramatic love triangles. But through it all, Sam and Dakota built their connection quietly, deliberately. One night, after a long day of filming, she called him from her trailer. I miss Scotland, she said. I miss the walks, the quiet. Then come back, he said simply. I'm shooting here for another month. I'll visit. And he did. He flew back and forth between Edinburgh and London, carving out hours where they could be just themselves. No cameras, no scripts, no red carpets. They cooked dinner together, watched old movies, and laughed about the absurdity of their lives. It was during one of those evenings, curled up on her sofa with a blanket, that Dakota turned to him. You know this is going to get bigger, right? They're going to speculate, ask questions, make things up. Sam brushed a strand of hair from her face. They always do, but we know what's real. She smiled faintly. And what's real? He kissed her forehead. The following morning, a reputable magazine reached out to both their publicists for comment. They wanted an exclusive interview about Hollywood's new power couple. Neither Sam nor Dakota responded. Instead, they packed a small bag and slipped away to the Highlands for a weekend. No phones, no headlines, just them. There, among the rolling green hills and misty lochs, they rediscovered the quiet that had brought them together in the first place. They hiked along rocky trails, shared tea by the fire, and watched the stars. For the first time in weeks, they felt like the world wasn't watching. Standing on a hilltop at dusk, Dakota took a deep breath. This feels like a movie, she said. Sam smiled. Better than a movie. She turned to him. Promise me something. Anything. No matter what happens, the press, the rumors, we keep this ours. We keep us ours. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Promise.